Welcome to the real, the free. It's Authentically Amy, come talk with me. Love, sex, truth, no shame inside. We're getting deep, and it feels so right.
Hey sexy besties, welcome back to Authentically Amy. I'm Amy, a certified sex and relationship coach, and today we're going to be talking about desire and libido, because if you feel like your desire for sex has been waning and your sexual wellness is declining with age, you are not alone. We all are feeling that way at different times in our lives, and I'm here to give a little bit more information about why we're feeling this way, what we can do about it, how we can reconnect with our partners, and find more joy, happiness, and pleasure in our lives. So first, the most important thing that we have to start with in any discussion about desire is that for our entire lives, we are bombarded with images on TV and in the movies, even in books, right? That desire is this spontaneous thing that you just walk down the street, you see someone attractive, and all of a sudden you're like, I must have sex with this person now, right? Like that is what we see in movies and TV. Even couples in movies and TV who have been together a long time, it's like they see each other and it just instantly start kissing and they're having sex, and it's all like a very fast thing, and there's all this lust and passion involved. And here's the thing, that's great in TV and movies and books, right? That's what we want to see. It's entertainment, but it doesn't always look like that in real life. So we're going to break that down a little bit more. What we're seeing in those images is what we refer to as spontaneous desire. Now, spontaneous desire can be really common for some people, and it's really common in the early days of a relationship, right? When you have a new relationship, there's novelty, there's all of this like new relationship energy. You might feel spontaneous desire to have sex with your partner just based on that like initial lust and excitement of being in that new relationship. So in spontaneous desire, right? And the other kind of desire we're gonna talk about is responsive desire. But in spontaneous desire, there's desire, then there's arousal, physical arousal, then you have sex, right? Now, how I explain this in a way that sometimes makes a little bit more sense for people is think about pizza. You're walking down the street, there's no physical stimulus or input that makes you think about pizza. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you are just like, I must have pizza. No matter what I'm doing right now, I must stop and I must have pizza. Pizza is my singular goal. So then you go and you have pizza. It's spontaneous. It comes out of nowhere. Now let's talk about responsive desire. What does that look like? Well, responsive desire is where you actually have arousal or some sort of stimulus, then you have the desire for sex, then you have sex. So what does that look like in pizza world? You're walking down the street. You're not hungry. You're not thinking about pizza, but you walk by a pizza shop. You smell pizza. You see the pizza. And all of a sudden, the only thing you want in the world is pizza, right? It was in response to the stimulus of seeing the pizza, smelling the pizza, experiencing sensorially pizza. So that's what responsive desire is, right? You might not have been in the mood for sex. Maybe you're part of the sandwich generation. You're taking care of children. You're taking care of aging parents. Maybe you have a really demanding career. You've just spent 12 hours working. You're exhausted. Nothing in your brain is making you spontaneously want sex because you have all these other things going on. But your partner comes to you. Maybe you've had, some shared moments throughout the day. Maybe you're just longing for that intimacy. Maybe you just start kissing, and now all of a sudden your body's like, ooh, in response to this stimulus, now I'm starting to get aroused. Now I desire sex, right? So I have like personal examples of these things, like spontaneous desire when we're young, right? When I was young and wild, my favorite spontaneous desire story, I was at a tailgate, like anyone who goes to the University of Florida must do. It's mandatory to go to tailgates. It's not, but might as well be. So at a tailgate, drinking, having a great time, spontaneous desire, meet someone, and we're like, obviously wanting to hook up, but we're at a tailgate. So where are you gonna go? We snuck into someone's laundry room. That was the spontaneous, it had to happen right there. We literally trespassed. Please, nobody come back. I think the statute of limitations has run. I don't think I can get in trouble for this. It was like 20 years ago, but literally snuck into someone's laundry room, spontaneous desire, went on with our business, went to this football game, okay? That's spontaneous. Responsive. Yesterday, I had a long day. I was exhausted, right? Sex wasn't on my brain the entire day because I'm so tired. But my partner starts kissing me and I'm like, ooh, okay, kick the dog out, put on the music, turn off the lights, let's go, right? It took a little bit of a stimulus, a little bit of something to kind of awaken my body and be like, oh yeah, I like this. I like having sex with this person. There's the arousal. And then once the arousal kicks in, the desire kicks in. So that's kind of some examples of spontaneous versus responsive desire. Why is this important? Well, again, like I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of relationships, we do tend to experience a little bit more spontaneous desire. Also, they have done studies on this and they have found that women typically tend more toward responsive desire than spontaneous desire. But you would never know that because everything we see, again, all of our media, everything, even the medical advice that we're sometimes given or pseudo-medical, right? Advice about how to improve our sex lives is catered towards spontaneous desire, which is really something that more men experience than women do. There's nothing right or wrong about either one. There's no value, there's no judgment. They're both valid. They're just different. And so when we talk about desire, especially for women, we just have to be conscious that sometimes we require stimulus first, right? And responsive desire. We were talking about new relationships earlier. A lot of times there is more of that spontaneous desire. Well, they've done studies, and one study showed that in 50% of relationships that lasted more than 3 years, there was a drop in sexual desire. So 50% of relationships just at the 3-year mark had already experienced a drop in desire. So this is obviously something that's occurring in a lot of long-term relationships. There's a million reasons for this, right? I am sure every single person listening to this could give me a different reason for why they feel like their level of libido or sexual desire has changed or gone down or just feels different. But let's talk about some of those reasons, right? Like long-term relationships, number one, they're just tough. You have to work on these things. And a lot of people are still really uncomfortable talking about sex with their partner. So if you're uncomfortable talking about sex with your partner, it's easy to envision how after a significant amount of time, if you're not having those conversations, things might start to drop off a little bit. You know, we spend a lot of time on, especially like parents, for example, we will spend a lot of time on like grocery shopping, planning our kids' extracurricular activities, planning play dates for our kids, all of these other things. And people put more time into all of that than they do into their sex life. And that is because of this concept of spontaneous desire, because people have been misled into believing that sex is just this spontaneous thing that's just going to happen because two people want to have sex. Like two people are attracted to each other, boom, they're going to have sex. So people do not put in effort into cultivating a better sex life because we've been told that it should just be this spontaneous thing and it's not a thing that requires work. And that's sort of where we've been misled, I think. And so just like we work on all those other things and we schedule things and we plan things with our family and our friends and all these other aspects of our lives, our careers. Think about how much time and energy we put into all those things, right? Those are our priorities. If you want sex to be a priority, you have to treat it like a priority. So it requires effort and it requires cultivation and it just requires some level of work. And again, it's not anyone's fault. We've just been sort of misled to believe that it should be this spontaneous thing. And if you're someone who is like, yeah, it doesn't feel like a spontaneous thing for me, you're not alone. You're not going to just wake up one day and be like, oh, all of a sudden sex is super spontaneous for me again. It's not going to happen. And it's better to recognize, one, that you might need more of a response to stimulus to get sexually aroused, or two, to realize like maybe this is something we need to work on and communicate about. And it's better to do that and get the results of like sexual satisfaction than to continue every day just sort of hoping and wishing and praying that this is something that's going to solve itself, right? The easiest solution for anyone who is looking to spice things up or increase their sexual satisfaction, rediscover their libido and desire, you can always reach out to a sex coach or a sex therapist, and they can help you work on those things. But I'm not just here to say, great, here's this issue, go call someone. No, I have some very tangible things that I think everyone can work on to sort of help. So the first one is, and this sounds paradoxical sometimes when I say it, but increased sexual activity, whether solo or partnered, can actually lead to more sexual activity. So it's sort of the more you do something and the more positive reinforcement you get, the more you're going to want to do something. The more you do something and it has negative reinforcement, let's say sex isn't satisfying for you, or there's other things going on in the relationship that are leading to this decrease, and so the sex is sort of disappointing, or it's just not where you want it to be, well, you're gonna seek it out less. And so it's a self-perpetuating cycle of decreasing that libido. Now, there was one study of people in long-term relationships who still had a strong desire. And what researchers found were some of the key ingredients for success. Sexual satisfaction and passion were higher, where, surprise, surprise, there were more orgasms involved. Now, a lot of people do have difficulty experiencing orgasm, and that is legitimate. And again, this is something you can work on with different providers. But also a lot of people don't really have difficulty experiencing orgasm, but maybe they just haven't felt the need or ability to speak to their partner about it. And this is where one thing I always tell people is faking orgasms does nothing. It doesn't help anyone, because when you're faking orgasm, you're teaching your partner that the wrong things are what lead you to that sexual satisfaction. The best thing you could do is not fake it, but to just give your partner instruction. And if you don't even know your own body well enough to know how to experience orgasm yourself, then I would suggest there's no better time than now to start learning about your own body. Masturbation is completely healthy. It's normal. It is part of a completely normal sexual being. It's part of your repertoire. There's nothing wrong with it. So figure out what you like so that then you can tell your partner what they like. So back to the study. That was a little bit of an aside. More orgasms involved, more oral sex, because another fun fact for everyone is that for women, 80% of women do not experience orgasm from penetration alone. They require manual or oral stimulation, or obviously like toys like vibrators and things of that nature. So oral sex is a great way to help both men and women experience orgasm. Changing of positions, variety of positions was another factor. This is because novelty is the spice of life. If you do the same thing over and over and over, there's kind of a high likelihood it's going to get boring. So, one thing that I find is great for varying positions is they make all kinds of fun, like scratch off tickets, books, all kinds of things you can buy that have different positions. And you can play what I like to call position roulette, which is like basically you just like take your book or your scratch off or whatever, and you just like flip through whatever you land on, you try. Now, granted, not all of us have the physical ability to try every position. Sometimes I look at these pictures and I am like, I am not an acrobat. I cannot stand and do a handstand while I'm having sex. It's not happening. So you might want to skip those unless you're very daring and very flexible, and then try them. And here's the thing. Even if you try a position and it's like a hot disaster, like it doesn't work, and you end up laughing hysterically with your partner, that's a great thing. Playfulness and laughter, sex doesn't have to be serious. Playfulness and laughter is only going to increase everyone's enjoyment and connection to one another. So try the position. If it doesn't work, you probably know what positions do work for you, and you can always go back to that. A couple other things, commitment to setting the mood. A commitment to setting the mood. I'm gonna get into that a little bit later with a few of my tips and tricks, but we wanna make sure we remember committing to setting the mood. And then lastly, the thing that I keep saying is communication about needs and desires. So those were the things that the study found. Okay, so what are some of basic things that we can do? So the first one is pumping up the sensory volume, right? So we kind of talked about this a little bit when we're talking about experiencing orgasm. So toys, vibrators, we need to start looking at these things. They're not a threat. They are a teammate. They are a tool like anything else. So if your partner is having a hard time experiencing orgasm without one, add it in. Be playful, experiment, find things that work for both you and your partner. Communication. I keep saying it over and over. Sorry to beat a dead horse, but it is the single most important thing. Like Salt and Pepper said, let's talk about sex, baby. If you find this difficult to talk to your partner about sex, you're not alone. A lot of people do. We probably wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of people find this really hard and uncomfortable. We have been brought up in a society where it's not normal to talk about sex openly. So of course it's going to be uncomfortable to talk to your partner about something that's considered taboo out in the real world. Listen, if it's just too difficult, you can always seek out a sex therapist or a sex coach or workshops on these things. But if you're feeling a little courageous, start small. Start super small. It doesn't always have to be like putting everything on the table at once. Fantasies. So one thing that has been found to work for a lot of women and men alike to increase their desire and libido is things like reading smut and romance novels. It kind of, gets the juices flowing, pun intended. People like to watch porn. And honestly, people just talking to your partner about their fantasies, it doesn't mean you're gonna do them. Your partner might have some fantasies that you're like, I'm never gonna do that, but just talking about it can be a way to kind of get things revved up again. Okay, this is one of my favorite tips, focusing on foreplay. If you wait until right before you have sex to think about foreplay, you've waited too long. Foreplay is not something that is just like the 10 minutes before you have penetrative sex. Foreplay is something that needs to start at least like the minute you open your eyes that day or even further back. It's about connecting with your partner, making sure their emotional and physical needs are met so they feel relaxed and comfortable enough to want to have sex. It's also about setting the mood early, right? I said I would come back to that. So what does that mean? Well, it could be something as easy as like starting to send like some sexy texts during the day, sexting, sexy texts, sexy pictures. It could be something as easy as like increased physical touch throughout the day, maybe like touching each other a little more than you normally do, and maybe kissing and maybe saying, I can't wait till tonight, XYZ, right? It doesn't have to be a big drawn out thing, but it's something that just, again, when we're going back to that responsive desire concept, we have to start that arousal process as early as possible, right? And it's not always possible super early, but the earlier you start it, the more likely it is to lead to the desire and the sex. Setting time for intimacy. So this is important. Again, going back to spontaneous versus responsive desire. People think, no, I'm not gonna schedule sex. That's weird. Scheduling sex is so weird. It's supposed to just be spontaneous. It's supposed to just happen. But unfortunately, we live in a world that sometimes that's just not gonna happen. And so we have to schedule time for it. Just like we put anything else on our calendar. And for a lot of us, our calendars are sort of like sacred, right? If you have a meeting with someone and you have to cancel for some reason, you're not just like, hey, sorry, I have to cancel. Usually you're like, hey, I have to reschedule. I have to cancel. When can we do this? When can we find a new time? So when we're talking about intimacy with our partner, we need to treat it the same way. Schedule a time, right? And for people who are parents or have other obligations, that means you have to look a little bit ahead. Hey, Saturday night, let's get a babysitter. Let's do this. Let's plan this thing. So we know it's gonna happen, right? And then if something happens and you can't do it, you can't just take it off the calendar and expect that it's just gonna get magically rescheduled. Treat it like a calendar appointment, reschedule it right away. Now, why is this important? Well, it goes back to all the other things I said. If part of getting us in the mood, responsive desire, is setting the mood early, if you know that Saturday night is date night, you can start those flirty texts about Saturday on Monday. And you can build up all week long. And I promise you, by the time you get to Saturday, you're probably both gonna be pretty excited about that scheduled date time. If you're waiting for sex to just happen, you might be waiting a long time. But if you take a chance and try scheduling it, couples actually do report much higher sexual satisfaction from scheduling it. Okay, just two more quick things. So one is afterplay. We've talked about foreplay, but we never talked about afterplay. And what do I mean by that? I mean cuddling and pillow talk. A lot of times, we have busy lives and we're just in a rush when we get done with our intimate time to just go on to the next thing. But here's the thing, taking 5 minutes to just lay with your partner, maybe cuddle, It's actually a huge benefit. And here's why. When we experience orgasm, there is a release of a lot of neurochemicals. That's what gives you all of those euphoric feelings. One of those neurochemicals is oxytocin, which is sometimes referred to as the bonding chemical. So what's really important here is when you're cuddling with your partner in those sweet moments, that oxytocin is causing you actually to bond. So it's actually having a positive effect, not just on you physically, but on your relationship because of that bonding hormone. And lastly, we've touched on this a little bit with the positions, but changing it up. Novelty is the spice of life. And I don't just mean like everyone should go out there and find new partners. No, I'm talking about finding, and it doesn't mean going crazy, right? I'm not saying, a couple that is more inhibited should like go out and have sex in public or do something absolutely outside their comfort zone. No, you can find ways to change it up and find novel things to do within whatever is comfortable for you. There's always something you can change within whatever boundaries you both have. So find something, even if it's one small thing every time, just to introduce some aspect of novelty. And it could be as basic as like a new piece of lingerie, right? Or a new toy or a new position. It's so small, but the impact is huge. So with that, sexy besties, I will leave you until next time, and I hope you have a great day.